Hey guys, so welcome to another episode of Drone Lemonade, and this is the SPC Maker 90NG, or what's left of it. It's just the bare frame. Stripped out all of the parts in here because when I was setting this up to try and fly it, which I never was able to fly, I got these horrible oscillations or twitching when I try to throttle up. And let me just show you a little quick clip here of what that looked like. So there was pretty much nothing that I could do to get the twitching to go away, and it has to do with the way that, well, it has to do with the frame selection. They've selected this frame and the constraints of this frame in terms of the components that are in here and the space that you have to put the components in here, and why we get a lot of vibrations. And it has to do with feedback, vibrations that could come from the motor spinning up, go into the arms, goes into the flight controller, and then there's a gyro on the flight controller that will take that vibration, and then you get a feedback loop where it starts twitching like crazy, and obviously you just can't fly that way. So they actually chose very good components for this model, and I'll show you all the components here in a second. I swapped everything into a new frame. But they chose the wrong frame for those components, and that's why no matter what I did, I was not able to get this to actually work. So the only solution I had was to take all of the electronics out and put it into a different frame that had more space in it, so that you wouldn't have things touching the flight controller causing vibrations. So for example, in the 95 GF here is probably the easiest way to show you. You have a stack here, you have the whole flight controller ESC stack mounted to the bottom plate here. There's no soft mounting here at all. And then at the top you have these standoffs here, these spacers that go into these holes that secure the top of the stack to the top plate. But if you have vibrations coming from the motors that go into the bottom plate, they're going to go through these metal standoffs into the top plate. So I think that's why I got vibrations when I first flew this model, and after I soft mounted these motors, they went away and I was good. However, I tried that with the 90NG and that didn't do anything, and it has to do with the amount of space that was between the stack and the camera, and there was less space here than there was on this one. So for example here, the way this was set up, there's actually a little bit, it doesn't look like it, but there's actually a gap between the back of the camera connector and the flight controller connector there that goes to the ESC. But on the 90NG, that connector was right up against the flight controller, which obviously has the gyro. So whenever vibrations would come in through the camera, which was glued into the bottom plate here, there was nothing I could do to get rid of those vibrations, because the vibrations would still come through the frame and into the flight controller. So I tried taking the camera off. I actually removed the camera completely, and I tried using the same TPU mount here on this frame, and there's just not enough space here between the stack and the front here, and no matter what mount I used, the camera would still butt up against the flight controller stack, and so that didn't help at all either. So I tried soft mounting the motors, I tried changing the camera mount, that didn't help. I actually removed the top standoffs here so that the flight controller stack wasn't touching the top plate. That didn't help either. So it turns out that because the flight controller has a different gyro than that's on this model here. So this model here has the Omnibus F3 with the MPU 6000 gyro. It's not as sensitive as the one that's on this one here, and a 10 amp 4-in-1 AC. So they, I think they heard some complaints from people about the 10 amp 4-in-1 AC not being enough, and it's probably not enough. They should probably go at least minimum 15. So they went to a 28 amp 4-in-1 AC in here, which is great, and that's fine. But then they went to a different flight controller, and they went to this one here. This is the Omnibus F4 Nano, and yeah, it's great that it has an F4 processor in here, but it has a different gyro. And let's see, where's the gyro on this one? Yeah, the gyro is right here, and it's not an MPU 6000. It's like an ICM something. I didn't remember the model number. Put up on the screen right here. But that gyro apparently is a lot more sensitive, and where this gyro was right where the camera was hitting. So the camera connector was right against this connector here, and then there were some wires here. So any kind of, even just the slightest amount of vibration would feed into this gyro, and then you get these massive oscillations and just wouldn't be able to fly. So my only solution was to rip out everything from this frame and put it into a different one, and where I could soft mount everything, because I think this is a very good board. In fact, while on this one here I have the F3, and I actually fly a Flash Betaflight 3.2. I'm running the dynamic filter, but I can't run the gyro and PID loop any more than I think I'm doing 4K on the gyro and PID loop on the F3, because for one, it's an F3. It's not as, the CPU is not as fast, and the dynamic filter is taking in more of the cycles. But on this one here, you get a lot more headroom. So I'm running 8K on this board, and with the dynamic filter, and the CPU is like 9%. So I could probably even go higher, maybe go 16K, but 8K is totally fine on this micro. Okay, so this is what I actually put everything into. This is the GEP-RC Hummingbird frame, and it's a little bit bigger. It's about 118 millimeters, I think. So you can see here that the motor distance is bigger. It allows more space for the components. And the camera mounting on this is a lot better. As you can see, you got these two side plates here for the mounting of the MicroSwift. And because of the design here, I've got plenty of space here between the back of the camera and the flight controller. And this frame design is actually shorter from the bottom plate to the top plate than this design here. So I had to rearrange this whole stack so that there wouldn't be vibrations going into the gyro. So you can see I've soft mounted the motors, and this whole stack here is soft mounted. And it's really difficult to see, but they got some rubber O-rings here. I got an M2 screw on the bottom that goes up through the 4-in-1 EC and through the flight controller, and then there's some nuts here that hold the whole thing down. And so this whole thing is soft mounted. The 4-in-1 EC is soft mounted, and then I got some soft TPU spacers there in between the ESC and the flight controller, so that when I throttle up, absolutely no vibrations get into the gyro. So even this video transmitter and receiver stack here is kind of loose. There's no pressure on it, so that if there's vibrations that are coming in through the bottom frame to the top plate here, to these metal standoffs, those vibrations that are transmitted to the receiver and video transmitter are not going into the gyro. And you can see the gyro is right there. It's right by that nut right there. It's kind of hard to see. So I made sure there's no wires touching that, and there's nothing touching that flight controller's gyro. And this flies perfectly fine. I mean, it flies great, actually. So, I think that the bottom line is, especially if you guys are building, or for you manufacturers out there that are looking at the frames and designs, you gotta be careful how you design your components, and what's actually in there and what's touching what, because if you just kind of screw everything really down hard, any kind of vibration is going to affect that gyro, and then you're going to have a micro that's not going to be able to fly. But the way this is set up here, it flies perfectly fine. The components are great. I like all the components. You got the same motors that are on the 95GF, the 1104 7500 kV motors, and I think they're SPC Maker branded as well. Exact same motors. I'm using the different props here than on this one. I'm using the Hulky 2040s. I think these are just fine as well on 3S. And basically just transferred everything over, the whole flight stack, video transmitter and receiver, the MicroSwift, and the motors. I did have to desolder the motors and resolder them because they were originally wrapped around the standoff here and soldered underneath from the inside. However, that added too much height to the stack where I couldn't put the top plate on, so I had to desolder all those wires and then solder them to the top here in this manner. So it's not my preferred way of doing it, but in order to do the soft mounting and to deal with the space constraints of this frame, this is what I did here. So if you want to see how I did that, that's how it works. Anyway, so it's really not a knock on any of the components that are in the model. I think the components are great. They did definitely improve the components over the 95 GF, and I think that they give you more leeway with the F4 flight controller. And I think if they're going to update the 95 GF, they should use these components and then definitely soft mount everything. This frame is just a little bit bigger than the 90 NG. I think that just gives you a little bit more lee room in terms of the vibration. Plus, the F3 flight controller isn't, and the MPU 6000 on the F3 flight controller isn't as sensitive. So you may have issues with the F4 flight controller on this frame as well. Well, I obviously I'm not going to put everything in here to test that, but that's just a theory that's probably what's going to happen. But all the components that are now in here are great. Flies perfectly fine and plenty of power. I think that the 28 amp ESCs give you a little bit more room on the top end of the throttle range. I think you get more power there. I think it flies just as nice as the 95 GF. So anyway, so if you do end up getting the 90 NG and you end up having problems with vibrations and oscillations, I'd recommend just swapping everything over to a new frame like this. You don't obviously have to use this frame, but something similar. You could even go to a 2.5 inch frame. The 28 amp ESCs will probably handle that no problem, even on 3S. But this is just one way you could put this together. Obviously, you're going to do it, the way you put it together in a different frame is going to be a little bit different, and it's going to fly a little bit different. But I have no issue with the components themselves. I think that they are good components. It's just that the way that they were put into that frame was pretty poor design. So anyway, I'm not going to go over the software configuration here. I'm just going to give you a CLI dump in the description. The flight controller is running Betaflight 3.2. Actually, it's the actual full version, not the release candidate. I updated all the ESCs to 16.6.7. I'll put 2 cards in the corner here for videos on how to do that, and then you can use my CLI dump in the description to copy my settings and my PIDs, and my PIDs will be in the CLI dump. This one, I'll go ahead and I'll show you some line of sight footage and the FPV flights. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you guys later. Okay, let's see what this can do, line of sight. Pretty smooth. I don't hear any oscillations or vibrations. Props sound pretty good. Let's do some flips. A little bit of bounce back there. Not too bad. All right, let's try a little punch out here. Wow. Come on back. Very floaty. Okay.